Buddhism, like the cultures associated with it, takes many forms and reaches many people. More than just a religion, for its followers, Buddhism is a way of life. In the year 563 BC, a prince was born in a town near the Himalayas in northern India. That town, Lumbini, is now in the country of Nepal. According to legend, the birth of this prince, known as Siddhartha Gautama, was accompanied by miracles. A seer predicted that a parting of the ways lay ahead. Siddhartha would either become a world ruler, or if he ever saw, together or separately, a decrepit old person, a diseased person, a corpse, and a monk, he would become a homeless seeker of the truth and a Buddha, an enlightened one. His father, the Raja, did not want his son to become a religious leader, so the prince was brought up in palatial luxury and protected from knowledge of the outside world. He married young and had a child. Finally, however, he went out into the streets among the people and for the first time looked upon old age, illness, and death. He sought out the nature of old age, of sickness, of sorrow, and of death. Siddhartha then came upon a Hindu holy man and was deeply impressed by the sadhu's calm and peaceful nature. As a result of this encounter, at the age of 29, Siddhartha left his home, his wife and child, and the promise of earthly power and glory. He took to the roads of India in search of the truth about human existence. The prevailing religion in India at that time was Hinduism, a religion that worshipped many deities and believed that living a life of extreme hardship was the way to gain spiritual merit. As he wandered, dressed in rags and penniless, Siddhartha encountered more Hindu holy men, or sadhus, who deeply impressed him with their simple lives of prayer and meditation. They lived as ascetics, having devoted their lives totally to God. He spent 5 years practicing extreme austerities, sometimes eating only a single grain of rice in a day, and living without shelter. At the end of this time, he realized that he was no nearer to his goal of attaining knowledge and wisdom. He abandoned the austere path of the ascetic and sat down in the shade of a bo tree to meditate. He said, "Let my skin wither, my hands grow numb, my bones dissolve. Until I have attained understanding, I will not rise from here." It was his 35th birthday, and for 7 weeks he sat in meditation, until at last his plea was answered. This is the story that is told of the beginnings of one person's spiritual journey, a journey that gave rise to the religion of Buddhism, the middle way, a path rejecting self-denial on the one hand and self-indulgence on the other. While meditating, Siddhartha had a vision. He saw beings passing away and being reborn, some into happy and others into miserable circumstances. According to the universal law of karma, by which it is believed every act of good or evil will be rewarded or punished in this life or in some other reincarnation.
Karma is energy, the law of conservation of energy, which means no energy will be lost. So no karma will be erased, no karma will be disappeared. So what I say now is eternally recorded. What I think now will be eternally recorded. What I do now will be eternally recorded. This determines our tomorrow as well as next year as well as next life.
Because he grew up as a Hindu, Siddhartha accepted the doctrine of reincarnation. He saw this cycle of rebirth as a source of human suffering. He saw that all is suffering. Birth is suffering. Death is suffering. Life itself is suffering. The end of this suffering, then, was nirvana, that is, escape from rebirth. To be sure, nirvana could not be achieved in this world. But by attaining a state of bliss, the contentment of no longer worrying about oneself, a person could escape the pain of life.
I think the fundamental wisdom of the Buddha has to do with allowing things to be as they are without, and trusting that you can let things be as they are without overlaying them with your concepts. The Buddha's discovery was that we don't have to create our own world. It's actually, there is a world that doesn't exist in our minds, that just exists. And you can trust that. You don't always have to be manipulating and editing and doing all these things to keep yourself from being harmed or to keep yourself having a great time. He said, if you are always trying to be comfortable, if you're always seeking pleasure, and you're always trying to avoid discomfort, if you're always trying to avoid pain, you're never going to have profound happiness or joy. Because there's this sense that you just want to have things on your own terms, and you'll manipulate it as much as you can so that it comes out your way. Well, imagine there's billions of people on the earth. If each one is trying to manipulate it so it comes out on their own terms, there's no way. You know, that ends up in wars. That ends up in all kinds of unhappiness.
As the Buddha, the enlightened one, Siddhartha Gautama began his teaching. In his first sermon, here in the Deer Park, near Banaras, India, he taught that what he had discovered was the noble truth of the way that leads to the cessation of pain. The noble eightfold way. Namely, right views, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. For the rest of his life, the Buddha traveled from village to village, teaching his eightfold way. The Buddha died at the age of 80 in the home of a friend who had unknowingly served him a meal prepared with poisonous mushrooms. At the end, he uttered these comforting words. In all of his lifetime, 2 meals stood out as supreme. One was the meal he ate before he sat beneath the bo tree, after which he received enlightenment. The other was the one he consumed at the home of his dear friend, after which he would receive nirvana. Long after the Buddha's death, his teachings were assembled by his followers into a collection called the Tripitaka, or 3 baskets, for the writings were made on palm leaves, like those used in basket making. Following the Buddha's death, his disciples continued his work, and this widespread religious fervor resulted in a creative outpouring of great works of art. Today, Thangka painting is a beautiful form of Buddhist art. These paintings depict events in the life of the Buddha and are used as objects of meditation. Some Thangka paintings are so detailed that they are painted with a brush of only a single hair. Thangka artists in Nepal begin painting at a very early age with simpler designs. Metal statues of the Buddha are also a popular form of art. These are cast from brass or bronze and then carefully finished by hand. Animals figure prominently in the Buddhist faith, reflecting the belief that all life is sacred. They are the subject of sculpture and are found at temples where they are fed and well cared for. Sacred mounds or stupas, such as this one at Kathmandu, Nepal, were built to contain Buddhist relics and remains. Many of these stupas were built as Buddhist missionaries spread the faith to other lands. These missionaries carried Buddha's story and his teachings throughout the world. Today, more than 250 million people follow his path to enlightenment, the middle way. Buddhists in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam follow what is called Theravada Buddhism, the way of the elders. This is an orthodox form of Buddhism, claiming to preserve the original interpretation of the Buddhist teachings, as taught by the senior monks of the Sangha, the monastic order founded by the Buddha. Theravadists believe that the Buddha was a great teacher rather than a god, and that they can bring about their own salvation by following the Buddha's example. Within Buddhist temples and monasteries throughout Thailand and Burma, nearly all young men spend a few months of their lives in intense training as monks.
Before Thai men marry,
they will go into the temple. They become monks. It is the custom in Thailand. They believe here that the custom can make their parents happy. And then when they die, they believe they can go to heaven.
Called novices until they are ordained at the age of 20, these young men learn discipline in their lives and in their studies. While in school, they study the fundamentals of Buddhism, as well as secular subjects, such as English and math. The school is usually connected to a temple. In Thailand, Buddhist temple complexes are called wats. Following their schooling, the young men then enter the monastery for several months of training in the Buddhist way of life, a life of monastic tasks, meditation, and study. The regular members of the monastery belong to the great brotherhood of monks known as the Sangha, which distinguishes Theravada from the other main division of Buddhism. Their monastic life is spent in such disciplined activities as ceremony and prayer. In this ceremony, the monks chant while the people bring food as gifts for the monks. This is part of a great celebration, marking the anniversary of the full moon, when the Buddha preached his first sermon. After the ceremony, the novices collect the food and distribute it among themselves and the monks. In Thailand, even the military participates in religious activities. On the night of the full moon, the soldiers come, along with many other people, to make offerings of flowers and incense, and to hear the chief monk of the temple speak. Later, people come to light candles and incense, and to chant and pray. Sworn to poverty, the monks receive their food, clothing, and other needs from the people, who gain religious merit through such offerings. Here, several monks return to the temple at sunrise after their early rounds to receive food. They do not beg. The food is offered gladly by the faithful. Solid food is forbidden the monks in the afternoon and evening, for Buddha warned that he who becomes fat is born into suffering again and again.
We take food 2 times.
We take food 2 times as monks,
And lunch.
in the morning and lunch.
And other time not.
Other times we do not eat. We do not take food, because that is a rule of the Buddha.
We can take water.
We can take water and coffee, But food, I cannot take food.
In return for supporting the religious community, the people receive their religious education and examples of right conduct from the monks. Following these examples, the people lead lives of great simplicity, serenity, and dignity, and achieve happiness through gentleness and kindness toward others, characteristic of Buddhists everywhere. Another great branch of Buddhism, known as Mahayana, or the large vehicle, is practiced in Japan, Korea, China, Mongolia, Tibet, and Nepal. It is called the large vehicle because it incorporates a much wider range of principles and teachings than Theravada Buddhism. The path of Mahayana Buddhism teaches that the Buddha was a god and pays homage to a host of Buddha-like deities who came to earth in the form of men. Unlike the Theravadists, Mahayanas believe they can be saved by their faith in these gods. Here at the great Swayambhunath Stupa in Kathmandu, Nepal, people come to pray. Sometimes this takes the form of turning prayer wheels. These wheels are inscribed with hundreds of prayers. By turning them, it is believed that these prayers are sent to heaven. The path to the stupa, like that of life, is steep and arduous. At the top, the faithful walk around the stupa, turning prayer wheels and chanting. In Nepal, Buddhism and Hinduism are almost indistinguishable. Hindus in Nepal believe that the Buddha was an incarnation of Vishnu, one of the principal deities of Hinduism. Here at Swayambhunath, a Hindu temple is built in the midst of the second most holy Buddhist site in Nepal. The two coexist in perfect harmony. Mahayanas tell how the Buddha once took some leaves and told his disciples that as these leaves were not all the leaves in the forest, neither were his teachings all of the truth. From the principles told by this story, Mahayanas allowed for a broader interpretation of the teachings of Buddhism than the Theravadists. In Japan, many Buddhists believe that there is a pure land in the West where Buddha-like deities preside. The Buddha Amida is the chief god of this paradise. There are many Pure Land temples in Japan which house these Buddhist deities. On special days, chants and music are performed to honor these divine beings. On the Buddha's birthday, small shrines called flower temples are set up, where the faithful can bathe the image of Buddha with water. Yet another form of Japanese Buddhism is Zen, with its ideals of simplicity, harmony, and tranquility. Zen Buddhism is reflected in a variety of ways, such as in this Japanese floral arrangement, a pure, simple expression of beauty. Zen monks lead a life of great discipline and simplicity. They believe that enlightenment can come in a flash of revelation, but much spiritual work is done while waiting for that revelation.
I was born a relatively materialistic family, but my parents are very faithful Buddhist. And I was watching their lives when I was child. And when I became a certain age, I realized that for them it was very important to have a religion, like the oasis in the desert. Otherwise, we may work and make money and live comfortable, civilized life, but still just traveling in a desert, an endless desert. And we do need the oasis. And to me, and like my parents, the religion is indispensable oasis.
Zen monks live in temples and monasteries, often surrounded by beautiful gardens designed specifically to quiet the mind and assist the monks in achieving deep meditation. Much of their lives is spent in prayer, meditation, chanting, and other rituals. Popular today in the Western world, Zen and other Buddhist writings and philosophies have found an enthusiastic following in areas of the United States.
If someone asked me, and actually people have asked me, why are we here, particularly because they were feeling a lot of despair. I mean, that can be just a philosophical, contemplative question, which it is, say, among religious groups, traditions, and thoughtful people of any kind. But suppose someone asked that question out of despair. Particularly, in that case, I would say that I have no idea why we're here, but I would encourage them to find out. And it like adds spice to life. And I would say, from my own experience, I guarantee you that that trying to find the answer to that question will give meaning to your life, particularly if you never find out why.
Another Buddhist tradition to find favor in the West is the Tantric Buddhism of Tibet. This form of Buddhism developed after the teachings of the Buddha migrated from India into the mountainous regions of Tibet. The teachings of the Buddha combined with the nature worship of the native Tibetan people and formed a powerful synthesis of the two belief systems. Tantric Buddhists rely upon prayers and incantations to guide their religious life. There is a belief in magic formulas to ward off evil and bring good fortune. Since the Chinese communists have taken over Tibet, many Tibetans have been forced to flee to Nepal and India for personal and religious freedom. At the Buddhanath Stupa in Kathmandu, Nepal, an entire Tibetan community has grown up around the stupa. The people here practice their religious rituals throughout the day. At a nearby Tibetan Buddhist monastery, monks live, work, and worship. As in Hinduism, the guru, or spiritual teacher, plays a central role. That is why the Lama, literally the higher one, plays such an important part in Tibetan Buddhism. Janggun Control Rinpoche is a Tibetan Buddhist High Lama, one who has become master of his own fate and has escaped the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The Rinpoche was asked what it means to be a Buddhist.
Instead of relying on external things, outside material things as the source of happiness, the source of the mind becoming completely free from confusion and from pain, Buddhism provides the opportunity to turn inwardly. And simply realize the nature of the mind, which inherently, which in itself, is free from pain, free from confusion and suffering. The opportunity to experience that freedom, which is provided through the Buddhist path, is what it means to be a Buddhist.
As you have seen, there are many different paths trod by the Buddhist faithful, and each one possesses characteristics of its own. Each is a reflection of those lands from which the faith took hold and developed. But all share a faith in the Buddha, a belief in the virtues he taught, and hope for the bliss and perfect peace of nirvana. In the words of the Buddha, "May all be blessed with peace always, all creatures weak and strong, all creatures great and small, creatures seen and unseen, dwelling near or far, born or awaiting birth. May all be blessed with peace."